How are you doing?
I am doing good, sir. I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. Happy Monday. Welcome, everybody, to Ink Tank episode number 26, your home for doodles, incubator posts, and Facet protocol. Without further ado, I'd like to give a warm welcome to Middlemarch and Michael Hirsch, the two that have brought us the Facet protocol, which could be the answer to archaically high, irrespectively disgusting gas prices on Ethereum. They've figured out a way to basically cut gas costs out by like 99%. And we're going to, dive into how they do that and why it's not a threat to the rest of this and how Vitalik might have gotten it wrong.
these are all questions. Gas bad, you know. And just to say this too, before we kind of dive into things, like this is Ink Tank. Y'all know us from bringing you all the latest in incubator news for doodles and kind of chopping up about doodles, but we have been, talking recently, and if obviously season 2 of Incubator is getting fired up, so we did want to take this opportunity that's kind of a lull in incubator news to educate the doodles community, educate our audience about things that are going on outside of doodles that we feel like are interesting and important about Web3. And so this is something that Tony and I, ETH descriptions and Facet protocol, something that we've been into. And so we're super grateful to have Michael Middleman March here, be here tonight. So you two gents, welcome. Let's see. Do we want to have maybe Middleman March? Do you want to introduce yourself briefly before we dive in?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us for this discussion. I'm my real name is Tom Lehman. I go by Middlemarch online because it's the name of my favorite novel. But I have been doing crypto for a short period of time in the grand scheme. But for me, it's felt like an eternity because I've been very obsessed with this thing called the Facet protocol and inscriptions, which I'm really excited to talk to y'all about. And my co-founder in this is Michael, and this is him. I think he's going to say something now, probably.
GMMF per.
Thanks, Tom.
Hey guys, thanks for having me up. Happy to be here. It's been awesome getting to work on this protocol, and I'm excited to talk about it today.
Awesome. And so, like we were kind of alluding to earlier, Doodles is a project on Ethereum, and I think a lot of us in the space have become a lot more familiar, open to this multi-chain future. And I hesitate.
The future is omni-chain.
I hesitate to even tee it up as that because I think we'll probably get to the punchline that like this is not a multi-chain approach, But maybe so you guys feel we feel like you guys are at maybe the cutting edge of kind of Ethereum technology. What is it you feel like is maybe one of the problems with Ethereum that you've seen, and then maybe we can dive into how ETH descriptions and Facet are solving those problems.
Sure. So as you mentioned, the gas is high on Ethereum, and I would go further even and just say like Ethereum as we know it is in a state of crisis right now. And by crisis, what I mean is no one knows kind of what's going to happen because the current trajectory is guaranteed failure. Everyone agrees on this. And in other words, the current trajectory of trying to get people to use the thing that costs $10 or $20 to send money or buy an NFT, and even more if you want to do something complicated, like there's universal agreement that this isn't going to work. And so it's in a state of crisis until we find the new path. And the other thing that's in universal agreement, that people have universal agreement at, is that it's not going to be like some easy fix. Like the merge, which was not easy for the people involved, was easy for everyone probably on this spaces. In other words, you didn't have to do anything. You wake up one day and now it's proof of stake, and that's great, better for the environment, and it's all good. It's not going to be like that for making Ethereum cheaper. You're not going to be able to wake up one day and just use everything in the exact same way. There are going to have to be some changes, and changes in technology, changes in usage, and changes. And the question is, what are these changes going to have to be? What are these trade-offs going to be? What's actually going to be the right way to do this? Because we can't just continue on this path. And if you look at the Ethereum Foundation, they have chosen one path, one option of several different, there are different options. We have one option, and we're excited to talk to you about that. But they've chosen one option as the way that is just the correct way to get out of this, and that is called layer 2 scaling solutions, basically. So if you go to the Ethereum website, or a million other websites, what you will see is this is the way to scale Ethereum. You look at the roadmap of Ethereum, which is all the features and stuff they're going to add. It's all built with this layer 2 thing in mind. And layer 2s basically are separate blockchains that report back their state, their information to Ethereum. Okay, so the main blockchains. That's basically the idea. And layer 2s are really interesting technologies, and they're cool and useful for many things. But we feel like they have been really prematurely chosen as the solution. Maybe they're a cool thing you can use for some stuff, but to be chosen as the solution, as the way forward for Ethereum, we think is a mistake. And we think it's a mistake because layer 2s have really big downsides, and there are good parts too, but they have really big downsides that we think are under discussed and under disclosed and papered over a little bit. And there are other really good options. There are other great options, actually. And obviously, we like the one that, we created the protocol, but like we were just copying Bitcoin, inscriptions on Bitcoin. So there's a lot of energy and there's a lot of other great options out there besides L2. So we're here to basically say, look, Ethereum is in crisis. Okay, don't think that you're going to be doing what you're doing now, right? It's going to have to change. And how is it going to change? Well, if you take Vitalik's word for it, Ethereum Foundation word for it, it's going to change in a very specific way that's maybe not so good. So we're here to say, hey, take a look at this situation, know that we are in a state of change, and think critically about it, and maybe open your hearts to a different path forward, because we're here with a different type of approach to scaling Ethereum that we'd love to talk about.
Yeah, no, I love your message, and I've heard it a few times, and it's always like invigorating to hear it. I'm like, yeah.
so then like I don't want to get insanely technical because some people might not completely understand, but let's go a little bit on the microscope. So like when you're like, for example, like let's look at like a layer 2, right? Like roll-ups and stuff. What layers? I know there's the execution layer, the settlement layer. Like, can you talk about like those like ingredients in the sandwich that makes a roll-up, something like Arbitrum or something?
Tony says let's not get technical, and then it's like, hey, let's talk about roll-ups.
But I'm trying to dumb it down, pun intended.
Sure.
The unfortunate thing is you kind of have to get into it, really, because but it's the other thing is, okay, so the unfortunate thing is you have to get into it, but it's also not that complicated. Like, I am not like, you don't have to be like some crazy zero knowledge proofs person. Anyone can understand the principles here if you're in this room. So there are two kind of notions going on. So one, the layer 2 notion is basically, because you mentioned execution layer and consensus layer, I think of that as kind of a different but a very important concept in this conversation. But when I think about the layer 2 thing, it's basically this idea: you have optimistic roll-ups, zero knowledge proof stuff. You have all these things, and it's all built around this idea that if we could take a blockchain that's not Ethereum and copy and paste that blockchain state to Ethereum, that would be good for us.
Right. Like, so you're outsourcing some of the functions to another blockchain, so it's cheaper, but then it settles on Ethereum. Correct.
So for example, if I have $100 on blockchain X, and that's valuable to me because I can use that for stuff, but oh no, what if something happens? Well, wouldn't it be nice if Ethereum knew that I had $100? And wouldn't it be nice if there was some infrastructure on Ethereum that could actually take that knowledge and give me the $100 if something really bad happened to blockchain X? And so, this is the theory, right? Like, no one's actually done this yet, like in the full form of that, to actually communicate that knowledge. There's optimistic no one has really done this, but the idea is, if you can do this, and let's assume they can, because we're optimistic people, right? Let's assume the best. If you can do this, there are benefits then to Ethereum being able to enforce the fact that you get the $100 if the L2 fails. Now, the problem, okay, is that, well, what else happens if the L2 fails? Well, not everything that you have on the L2 has a counterpart on the L1, right? Like, if you bridged in $100 to the L2, and then the L1 knows about that, and the L1 knows your balance in the L2, and the L2 blows up, well, now we can give you that $100 back because it's sitting in a bridge on the L1. Okay, so that's like the benefit of the L1 knowing everything. But suppose you created an NFT on the L2. or something even more complicated than NFT, created a huge DApp with the game and a thing and a whole economy, and just you did a whole big blockchain thing like you're supposed to do, build cool apps, right? That doesn't have a counterpart on the L1. So just because the L1 knows the state of the L2, it doesn't actually help you if the L2 stops. Another example would be if an L2 smart contract holds money. So for example, if you bridge in money and then you lock up that money in a liquidity pool, okay, well now the L1 knows that a contract on the L2 has money, but if the L2 blows up, it's not like that contract exists on the L1 to claim it. And so basically the overall problem with L2s is they are really in a lot of big trouble if they shut down, and they can shut down at any second, right? Like I want to just be very clear. It's not an exaggeration. At literally any second, any L2 can stop forever, right? This is something that, Vitalik's not going to talk about. No one likes to think about this. It's a scary idea. I don't want it to happen. It would be good for my thesis, but it would be bad for people. This is like, like going around and saying FTX could blow up at any moment. Like no one wanted to think that until it happened. But we saw this, right? We saw Base shut down for a period of time last year. We saw Arbitrum, the biggest L2, shut down for almost 2 hours in December. Now, someone might say, well, 2 hours. It's like, well, 2 hours is a long time if you were talking about critical software. Like, what if they had never brought it back up? So if an L2 shuts down, no one knows what happens to a lot of the money on there, but some of the money they do. And L2s can shut down at any moment. And so now you have this situation where, well, this is a pretty big security issue. So that's kind of the issue with L2s. And that issue, just to again emphasize that the issue is worse today because the L2s don't do what they're supposed to do today. They're working on it. But the issue I'm talking about is even if they do everything they set out to do, they still will have this issue. And so what we're interested in is, okay, well, how do you not have the issue of, well, you get shut down and people lose a ton of money. So that's kind of like what we're interested in. But that's when we look at the L2s, that's kind of the picture of what they do and what they don't.
No, that makes total sense. I do want to kind of zoom out a little bit further, right? Because our audience is ETH native and maybe Flow native. I won't go so far as to say Flow native. But let's just take this from a much more kind of broad perspective. If I'm just an everyday degen, right? I'm trading NFTs. I see gas as the cost of doing business, right? Sometimes it's high, sometimes it's low. Why should I care about ETH subscriptions?
Well, if the price of gas doesn't bother you, if you have infinite money to spend on gas, then, and your customers do, then you probably shouldn't. Like Ethereum itself, if it worked, would be the best option. It's like using Ethereum in the usual fashion, no L2s, no nothing. That's the best, but it's too expensive. So the reason you would care about subscriptions is that you look at the options for how to make Ethereum cheaper, and you'd say, well, I want an option where my NFTs can't get destroyed, can't get shut off, can't get deleted.
Right.
And I look at an L2 and I say, well, if I mint an NFT on an L2, it could get deleted at any time. So I don't like that. I want my NFT or whatever it is on using a protocol that can never be shut down by anyone ever, or at least, is as robust in that regard as Ethereum. Because even Ethereum, the world blows up, Ethereum is gone, but Ethereum is pretty darn good. So you say, I want something as good as Ethereum with respect to the longevity of my NFTs, and L2 is not going to get you that. So you think, well, maybe I want to try the subscriptions thing.
Well, and maybe, I'm looking at things like Solana, that's like a lot of, people recently kind of started experimenting with Solana from the ETH side. And they're like, wow, like little to no transaction costs. This is amazing. Like, and a lot of new behavior started to emerge as a product of that. It would be really interesting to see if people on the ETH side started to dabble in e-subscriptions and Facet protocol and started to experience some of those things on Ethereum. And I want to be very clear when I say on Ethereum, because that was one of the things that drew me into ETH subscriptions is I didn't even have to change my network on my MetaMask to interact with ETH subscriptions. It just was Ethereum, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, I mean, just from like a user experience point of view, like if you want to use Base or Arbitrum, any of those things, you have to bridge, which like on Base is, if you use the one that Coinbase actually built, it costs a ton of money and it's slow as molasses. But that idea that you can still just use your MetaMask and ETH as it is incredibly simple to teach people how to do it. It's just like all you do is instead of going to OpenSea, you go to a different marketplace. It's great.
And philosophically, it is also, it's like and that's in the tweet that's pinned up here, we are not here to sell you on a different blockchain. And what is annoying a different blockchain? It's the things you said, but it's also like, what am I dealing with right now? Like, it's not just, is this thing going to get shut off? Is this thing going to be slow? What the transaction costs? It is controlled by a different person. Like Coinbase is controlled by a guy called the CEO of Coinbase, right? Like Arbitrum is controlled by, let's see, peel back the layers. Ethereum, you know who that's controlled by. It's controlled by no one, basically. And so it's really powerful. And so for us, we're not creating a new thing to come and play in our new thing. We're saying, here is an idea for how to use your existing thing differently. Okay, take the exact stuff you have and just look at it in a different way. And that's what Facet and Inscriptions are both about. It's about looking at, you could think of it as looking at how Ethereum could have been designed if it was, in our opinion, designed better. It's like how, what is the right way? What is a good way to use a blockchain? Not, okay, let's invent a new cool chain and get everyone to use it.
Well, yeah, like in an anecdotal sense, sorry, I didn't mean to dunk on you, Liz. Like there was this thing that happened a while back where somebody created this weird adhesive, right? And they were like it was like supposed to be like glue or it's supposed to be like tape, but it wouldn't work as good, right? It just had this thing like where it just wouldn't stick that well. You know what it ended up being? It ended up being the adhesive they used for sticky notes. Do you know that stuff? Sticky notes, like how you put it on places and it doesn't have like the weird adhesive marks. Like they built something, had no freaking idea. They thought it was just like something to be scrapped. And it turned out to be something that like tons of people use nowadays.
Is this an analogy for the call data?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Like, some people are looking and they're like, oh, we're going to Solana because ETH is so slow. Oh, we're going to here because ETH is so expensive. When it's just like, well, maybe you guys just aren't using it right.
The sticky note glue has been here the whole time.
Yeah.
Okay.
It is true. It is true. And I'll tell you the reason it's true, because you mentioned it's like this thing is bad for the thing, but then you look at it differently, it's good for the other thing. Like when you look at Ethereum, it's like, what do you see? And if you like NFTs and if you like doing interesting things, you probably see smart contracts, right? Like when people first asked me, what's Ethereum? I say, well, you know about Bitcoin. Well, Bitcoin doesn't really do anything, but Ethereum has these things called smart contracts that are like these computer programs. And you can actually do anything with them. And that's pretty incredible. And the adhesive side, I don't know exactly, but the point being that smart contracts, if you look at them in a different way, you will see, okay, wait, they are not actually the most amazing part of Ethereum. They are not actually this thing that you tell people about. And they are, because it's like the easiest way to explain it. But the reality of the smart contract is they are a flaw in Ethereum. The entire reason that Ethereum is so expensive is because they were trying to find the best possible tape, basically. It's because they were trying to create a super convenient computing environment that was too expensive. They were trying to create the business class lie flat of computing environments, which is what smart contracts are. So basically all the problems we have in Ethereum stem to the creation of smart contracts, which are kind of seen as the most important thing in Ethereum. And it turns out that if you can eliminate them, you can save a ton of money and actually lose no functionality, but it's more annoying to do it. And you have to spend your life on this whole protocol and all this kind of stuff. But that's the weird Gestalt shift, is that smart contracts are not the best thing ever. They are an amazing idea, and I wish they worked, but they are the thing that got us into this issue right now where it's too expensive.
Okay, maybe that's I love that you got into the whole smart contract piece there. So maybe that's the part where, as your everyday average degen, I hear you say the smart contracts are the business class, right? And I think that a lot of people assume that smart contracts are required to mint, hold, trade, list NFTs. But what I'm hearing is that's not necessarily the case. That maybe NFTs could be in the economy seats. Maybe they could make up 80% of the volume of the air traffic. They don't need this Ferrari or whatever kind of analogy you would make, and that maybe they're not required. Is that what I'm hearing correctly?
Yeah, I mean, it's you can still get the if you use subscriptions, if you use Facet, you're still in business class. It's a different way. But here's what I would say. With smart contracts, it's like, okay, someone has to add 2 + 2, right? That is a fixed reality of the earth. If you mint 2 NFTs and you have 2 NFTs, your balance is now 4, and that number 4 needs to be available to the world so they can see if you have permission to enter the Discord channel or whatever. And so the question is, who does 2 + 2 = 4? Okay. And it literally is that, because when you mint 2, 2 + 2 = 4. It's not like some complicated thing. And so when you are dealing with smart contracts, the answer to who does 2 + 2 = 4 and every other computation are the Ethereum validators, right? And these people are really stressed out because they are doing the entire consensus layer of Ethereum. They are sequencing they're putting together all the blocks, they're validating that everything's good, and they're looking at each other and making sure no one else is stealing, and you need a 4 terabyte solid state hard drive to do it. And getting a validator to do 2 + 2 = 4 with you is a great luxury. It's like getting getting the president of the United States to make you a sandwich or something. Like, that's real business class. Like, even if it's a bad sandwich, it's still pretty luxurious. And so when I say business class, I mean that these validators on Ethereum are not only going to tell you, whether other validators are trying to lie or who is in a block. They're not just going to put the blocks together. They're also going to do all the math for you. That's luxury. Okay. Now, it turns out that that's not necessary or even good, right? Instead of the validators making all the sound, doing 2 + 2 = 4 a million times, the validators can just do the only thing that they are uniquely suited to do, which is decide which transactions go into each block and in what order. And so all of us out here should respect that and not burden them with more busy work that we could do for them. And so if you lighten the load of the validators and you take some load off onto us, that's the sort of business class to economy thing. It's like we have to do a little more work so we can have a system that that makes sense. So the overall picture here is that we are trying to do computation and create state like how many NFTs you own and so forth. But we are trying to not force the validators to do it, because we want them to focus on the stuff that only they can do. And doing these computations are things that everyone can do. So we kind of outsource that from them. So that's kind of the that's the more specific version of business economy. But there's no reason that the experience for a user can't be the same. Like, a normal user doesn't have to know, right? Like, oh, are the validators using it for me? It's just someone has to do the programming to make it good for the normal user. And that's what we're trying to, accomplish with, inscriptions and Facet. But make no mistake, like, as a user, if you are using one of these protocols, you should not know the difference at all, except you're paying lower gas. Like, there should be zero ever difference ever. If someone's watching you use it, they should say, oh, wow, that's cool. They're using Ethereum and they're paying lower gas. Like, there should be no difference. But you're being nicer to validators.
No, that's interesting. I mean, from my experience, trading itty bits on Ordex, I'm like, might as well be Blur. It might as well be this. And it requires no extra effort on my part in that regard. Now, when I hear you describing, like, hey, let's take a load off the validators, let's quote unquote settle on Ethereum. Like, it sounds like the bull case that I've heard about layer 2s for the entire time I've been in the space. But you're saying that could be accomplished without leaving layer 1 Ethereum. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, basically. It's
How's that
layer
done?
2s. Well, so one thing we don't do, right? Layer 2s also give you more throughput, right? They say, hey, Ethereum does a block every 12 seconds. What if we do a block every second or something? So the layer 2 has an extra feature they're trying to build there, which we actually, let me take that back. We are working. Okay, let me just answer the original question. So the idea is, hold on.
No problem at all. Take your time.
Yeah, my iPhone, the AirPods went. So yeah, so I'm back. Yeah. So basically, the idea is this. So if you think about going and telling a smart contract something, right? Like, you go to a smart contract and you say, hey, smart contract, I want to mint 2 NFTs. The smart contract will take your message and look at it and say, okay, I'm going to check, is this a valid request? Like, is it possible to mint 2 NFTs? Is the sale closed? Okay, is there enough money? Okay, if there is, okay, let me update the state inside of the smart contract, my little record keeping book, and I'll say, who, I'll say that Tom minted 2 NFTs, and here are the numbers, and then I'll update his balance and all this kind of stuff. So that's what a smart contract does when you mint. Now, in Facet, we invite you to sort of ask this question, well, what happens if you took that same request and sent it to nowhere? We use the Facet inbox, which is the address that's all zeros and ends in face7. That's what we use, but you could use anything. But the idea is you send it not to a smart contract, but to no one. And from the standpoint of a normal person who doesn't know about this protocol, you'd think, who is this person sending a command to mint into the ether, into the garbage? Who would ever do this? But it turns out that if you are sending a command to mint to a smart contract, or you're sending that same command to the null address, that's the same thing, right? That's the weird twist here, is that that's the same thing. In other words, you can figure out, as an observer, you can figure out whether that mint succeeded and what the balance would be and everything you'd want to know. You can figure it out whether or not the smart contract is processing it also or not. So you kind of do the work that the smart contract would be doing, and that work cannot be forged because anyone has the publicly available information about how you did it and can redo the calculation for themselves. And so you are basically the bottom line here is that if you look at a smart contract, what do they actually do? Well, all of their information comes from users, and all of their rules are deterministic. They don't have a choice. They have to do the same thing every single time. And so because of that, they aren't really actually doing anything. You have all the information they have. You have the rules that they use. You can keep track of what they would do on a piece of paper if you wanted to. And furthermore, if you wanted to check to see what was in a smart contract, you could always compute what their state would be before you checked. Like, there's no way a smart contract's inner state could ever surprise you if you were keeping track of the transaction history. So Facet really exploits this idea that smart contracts aren't actually doing anything. They aren't actually storing any genuine information. They are just keeping track of running totals as a convenience. And so by looking at the transaction history, you can figure out, what NFTs exist and who owns it and so forth without actually ever using a smart contract. So it's not really the same as a. Well, anyway, yeah, that's kind of the idea.
So then, like you're saying, you said Ethereum validators do what? The best sequencing blocks?
Right. So, one way to think about it is deterministic tasks versus non-deterministic tasks. What I mean by that is deterministic tasks are 2 + 2, as I mentioned, like complicated math problems.
Like logic.
Logic, yeah. Things where everyone gets the same answer every single time.
So where does that occur if it's not occurring on chain now? Like, where do you guys do that?
Right. So to answer your first question. So the thing that validators do really well is this non-deterministic thing of who goes in the block and in what order. So that's like the divide, basically, because there's no way to determine using logic what order transactions are in a block. It is it's just something that happens through this proof of stake protocol, through Ethereum. It just happens, and that's the answer, basically. So that's one thing. Deterministic stuff you can verify, and it will have the same answer every time. And so for us, the idea would be, you and I are both trying to mint the same NFT, right? Only one of us can win. Well, who wins? The person whose transaction appears first in the block. Now, that is a question that we need the validator to answer, right? Like, there's no, that has to come from the validators. Who wins? But the consequences of that, anyone can deduce, right? They say, okay, well, you won, you came first, you won. So now, let me see, well, what's your balance? Okay, well, before you minted it, your balance was 10. And after you minted it, your balance is going now to now be 11. And that's deterministic calculation that anyone can do. And so what we have is a piece of software called the Facet VM, which will do all these computations for you and tell you the state of every contract. And this is a piece of open source software that anyone can run and use and verify. And so that's kind of how we actually do it in practice.
Mm-hmm. Is this what people are referencing when they say like the indexer? Is that the Facet VM?
Yes, you could also call it an indexer. We call it a VM because it does the logic that's more general. It has the capacity to do like general logic, like in the same way smart contracts can. But indexer is also good. I like indexers. There's the inscriptions indexer, which is the most basic level of like who owns what inscription. And on top of that, there's the Facet indexer or Facet VM, which allows you to do more general computation.
Now, I know I've heard on the timeline, that's been one of the criticisms of inscriptions and Facet VM is like, oh, these quote unquote off-chain indexers, quote unquote. It's proposed that is some kind of vulnerability. Like, I guess there's pros and cons trade-offs. The L2 has cons and security problems. Like you said, they could be shut off at any time. And so people have proposed that the indexer could be shut off at any time as well. How do you address that concern, or how do you conceptualize that?
Sure. So, my goal would be, because there are criticisms that are valid and, we have improvements to make and everything. The indexer thing really has no merit as a criticism. And I really want to be, I really want to help do my best to convince people of this in a very positive way. So let me try. So the first thing I would just point out is indexers are everywhere in Ethereum. Okay. It almost doesn't even make sense to say like what an indexer is, because they are so far, woven into our, culture. So I'll define an indexer. I'll say an indexer is anything that allows you to get information that an Ethereum node can't instantly give you, right? So as an example, if you want to find out who owns an NFT, an Ethereum node can instantly give you the answer. You don't need an indexer. But if you want to find out all the NFTs you own, that you can't get from a Ethereum node in a reasonable amount of time. So you have to have an indexer to pre-calculate it. And so if you want to know, for example, your ERC20 token. So if you've ever been to OpenSea and looked at your profile page, or Uniswap and traded a token and saw your list of tokens, you have relied on an off-chain indexer. And, you probably didn't feel bad about that. You probably felt fine. And in fact, you better have felt fine, because there's no way to use any of these things without indexers. It is not possible. So none of this could possibly ever exist in any form that we know it without indexers. That's one side of the coin. So if you use your OpenSea profile page, you must like indexers, but also it's fine. And the reason it's fine is because indexers are performing deterministic calculations that anyone can verify with an Ethereum node. So if you have an Ethereum node, and from that node, you're getting, the decentralized information of Ethereum, right? So like the presumption, right? Anything the node spits out is legit because it's coming from Ethereum. Well, if you have an Ethereum node and the rules and enough time, you can validate any of these things. You can validate how many NFTs you own to validate your OpenSea page. You can validate the tokens you own to validate what's going on Uniswap. And you can validate the inscriptions you own using the inscriptions protocol. Now, it is not necessarily easy to do that, and we want to make it easier. We just open sourced our indexers. That's possible now. But the whole premise of this is there is a very strong social reason for people to get this right, and you can change and change services if they don't. So Etherscan, enormous indexer, completely closed source, has gone down, has made mistakes. So it's like the way Etherscan stays on top is by the knowledge that someone can replace them using the same open, knowledge, the same centralized information if Etherscan, does something, bad. So that's kind of the overall culture of, Ethereum, and it's something that is reflected in inscriptions. But we also respect the fact that inscriptions, they're new. Etherscan's old, OpenSea's old. So when it's new, you have to be as clear as possible, and that's really what we've tried to do, and I think achieved with our new open source indexer. And we're doing even more work on this to make it easier to use. But basically, if you run this piece of software which is open source, you can validate every single thing eScriptions.com says or Facet Scan says if you're on the Facet one. So you can do all of this stuff yourself, and the only input is knowledge you get from an Ethereum node.
Yeah, that makes sense. I like the analogy you used about OpenSea profile, Uniswap profile, things like that, because I think that's something that conceptually, I'll say maybe for myself, like I would have thought like, oh, I'm looking directly onto the blockchain, but that's just like not the case, And so hearing you say that, makes so much sense. And so okay, so we've established that eScriptions are legit. No, I'm just kidding. But we've kind of addressed a few of the concerns around eScriptions, heard a little bit about them. I think that from my experience from looking from the sidelines, it seems like eScriptions have come a long way. And we can get into Facet a little bit later as well, but have come a long way in a short period of time. My first interaction was John HQ putting some of his collection scribes in emblem vaults. He said that it was the most, like he said it was cursed, right? And to the point where recently, I've minted a couple collections on eScriptions, and it was seamless and great UI, great marketplace, all of that. Now, I've seen a lot of uptick in collections minting on Ordex and things like that. Now, for Michael or you, Tom, did you see that this is where eScriptions was going, like 10K collections, things like that, or did you see it going another direction when you first started diving into it? Like, what's your kind of thoughts around that?
Yeah, Michael, you talk. I've been talking so much. I gotta shut my mouth.
Get this man a lozenge.
It's good. It's good. You're great at talking, so I don't mind. Yeah, I think Tom and I we come from NFTs. Funny enough, like one of the biggest, I think almost I wouldn't be surprised if like 70 or 80% of all eScriptions were not pictures though. And that was kind of surprising to Tom and I. But as far as like 10K, I don't know about 10K collections exactly, but we definitely created it for cheaper NFTs. Was like our initial selling point when we were telling people about it. It was like it's a cheaper way to create and trade NFTs. And so yeah, no, not surprising. The surprising one was when people started creating like fungible tokens on it, and we were like, the fuck? Like, this is not what we made this for. You guys have ERC20 contracts for this, you dummies. Like, and then like the funny thing is that's like what led to the creation of Facet, because then we were like, well, obviously, like, Tom and I we were not in that world. Like, we're not shitcoin traders, and so we just didn't even our minds didn't even go there when we were working on this. And so, but it's like it's so obvious now that like trading coins on Ethereum is like one of the it is the most gas consuming thing on Ethereum. And so it's like, obviously, if anyone was to benefit from lower gas, it would be people trading crypto on Ethereum. And so it makes so much sense now looking back. And that's what led to the creation of Facet. We saw what was happening with BRC20s on ordinals and like all of these like sub protocols coming out. Like what I thought was every other day I would see on Twitter, like this new sub protocol on ordinals.
We want to do the same thing in a different place.
Well, it's just like how I just can't imagine being a dev for ordinals wallet trying to keep up with all of these sub protocols, and we did not want that to be the path forward for eScriptions. And so we were very, very, very slow to like support, or not even support, just like even endorse like any sub protocol. And we but at the same time we we love the ERC20 descriptions and everyone that was like around that back, even when Tom and I weren't even, were like, WTF, because it kind of opened our eyes. But at the same time, we didn't want that to be the path, because if one day it's an ERC20 protocol on descriptions, the next day it's a token splitting protocol, the next day it's another DeFi protocol, the next day it's staking. Like you could never you'll never run out of new sub protocols. And that's why we created Facet, because we did not want like these endless sub protocols and all this like mess and craziness for anyone trying to build on top of descriptions. And so Facet solves that by creating this basically the EVM, but without smart contracts. And we call it the Facet VM. And it works the exact same way that that the EVM works. Not the exact same way, but very similar, where you deploy a contract. That contract has methods in it. It's written in a language that it looks very much like Solidity, and offers line to line. You like the contracts that we have on there. We have some for like that are like just literal port line by line from other existing Solidity contracts, but I digress. The idea is that you can deploy contracts, you can write them, you can mint from them, you can call them. Like it is a full-on like EVM experience, but there's not a single smart contract being used, and that is that stems from the heart behind what led to the creation of descriptions, which is the complete avoidance of smart contracts. And my kid is crying in the background, so I'm gonna let Tom take over from here. I'll be right back.
No, that's totally fine. Hey, family first. But thank you for explaining all that. And maybe that's where I think there could be a little bit of education, right? Is descriptions, we'll just say NFTs inscribed into the call data of L1, or what the word is eluding me. Let's just call it Ethereum L1. So is Facet a different protocol? Is it an L2? Like how do you describe or think about Facet? And how is it different in descriptions?
So definitely open suggestions on this one. So it is it's a different protocol, but it's built on top of descriptions. And what that means is it is using descriptions to do something that they weren't actually intended to do. It's funny because descriptions is using call data to do something that it wasn't intended to do. And we are actually like twisting the meaning of descriptions. And we're doing it in the following way. Descriptions were intended to be cheaper NFTs, right? Each individual description was intended to be an NFT, like a pretty picture, right? This is what we intended it to be. Facet twists that and says, wait, what if descriptions were not NFTs, but rather were computer commands, right? Computer commands, like the same sort of commands you send to smart contracts. So for example, one command could be, I want to mint. Another command could be, I want to transfer. Another command could be, I want to create a collection. Another command could be, and on and on and on. So it is a reinterpretation of descriptions. And if you are creating a token or an NFT or anything like that within Facet, the descriptions are not going to represent the actual asset. They are going to represent the commands that you send to manipulate the asset and create it and change it and all that kind of stuff. So it is an descriptions-based protocol, but it uses descriptions in a way that is not standard or intended by its creators, and it's not going to be like compatible with like ittybits, because ittybits uses descriptions. Like each ittybit is an description, and that uses it to represent art. If you were to build ittybits in using Facet, the inscriptions would be, commands to mint them and transfer them and so forth.
So can there actually be NFTs on Facet itself?
Yes, and coming soon for more. Right now, the only NFTs you can create are ENS contracts, because we created this thing called Facet cards, where you can own your name on Facet, which is useful in a bunch of ways, like ENS is. We're actually launching a marketplace for that. That's actually good. We should promote that tomorrow morning at 8 a.m.
Nice.
Eastern. It's tomorrow. If you want to check out the first ever NFT marketplace on Facet, that's kind of cool. Go to facetcards.com/trade or facetcards.com/anything. It's a nav bar. You can just click trade. But that is the first step, and then very soon there's going to be a bunch of different ways to create different types of NFT collections, generative art, open edition, normal stuff. So this is a huge use case, because inscriptions are amazing to be cheaper NFTs, but they are also extremely limited, and that's kind of the point and the beauty. Like, if you just want to do something, go do it on inscriptions. But like, again, using IttyBits as an example, like if you're trying to make a collection, like look at how much work Jeremy put into like making IttyBits like work, on inscriptions. A lot of work, basically. Okay, a ton of work. So if you want to make a collection on inscriptions, good luck doing that. It's not built in. It's not that great. Basically, it's hard, and that's why I think you've got to be really, really focused on it in the same way Jeremy was. So we want to have a place where, just like on Ethereum, you can just click, 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 and now you have a collection that you can mint on. It'll have all the typical nice things about a collection, like the maximum supply, and people can mint up to that point, and they can pay you a certain amount. Like minting a collection on inscriptions, you have to have like and Ordex, by the way, also has done a ton of work on this. Like the mint of the success of IttyBits, I think, also points to the limitations we're trying to overcome, because you really have to be a very hard, smart working people to do that, and not everyone can do that. So yeah, we want Facet to have that option. But if you just want to create something right now, you don't want a collection, you just want to create, Facet will never be as good as inscriptions for the most basic use case. So that's why I'm still very supportive. Obviously, I mean, I love it. It's my whole thing. But but if you want to have extra stuff going on, Facet is going to be a compelling option.
Yeah, I would say, like, if you're wanting to just put art on chain and that's like it, then that's like great for inscriptions. If you're wanting a 10K collection, if you're wanting to, and I'm not encouraging them to drop shitcoin, blah, NFA. But if you're wanting to, create a token, like anything with anything you were used to doing with smart contracts, if you want that same experience, but cheaper, but on Ethereum, you would use Facet. And so, like the, even so, y'all mentioned buying and trading inscriptions, how cheap they were. Well, they would be way more cheaper on Facet, and the reason is because even inscriptions marketplaces require you to use and interact with smart contracts, and that's because of the limitations that are around inscriptions. Like you can't allow another address to send your inscription on your behalf. It's a very primitive protocol, but that's like very, that's kind of like its beauty, is that it's very primitive and limited, and you don't want to change that. Like, you don't want to add all these complexities to inscriptions and lead to, like I was saying before, like have all these like new like sub protocols that are solving all these different problems, trying to like fit a square peg into a round hole. Facet, what we created Facet for is like this one sub protocol that solves everything. If you want to use these inscriptions in its like purest form, then then definitely do it. But if you're looking to do more complex things or just simple things, but like things like creating an NFT collection with an allow list, you know, there are ways you can do that with descriptions, but it's not, for one, it's, you know, it's not like, for one, it'll be cheaper on Facet, but there's a lot more, it's just a different experience. For example, when doing a mint on inscriptions, typically, you are going to be sending, this is a popular approach right now, is like you send ETH to an address, and then they have some bot that is minting them for you, or describing these images and sending them, and it's great, but I wouldn't say that that's an ideal experience where you are sending ETH to someone and then just hoping that they describe what you paid for. With Facet, it's just like the EVM. You mint it and it's there. And so, things like that, that's why we built Facet. And I'm not, I don't want anyone to, feel like I'm like throwing shade on like the builders that have created these like really cool toolings around descriptions, and they've done some amazing things. I'm just saying that, like, instead of trying to fit a square peg into a round hole, that's what Facet is for. And I would definitely encourage people who are looking for these types of solutions, instead of trying to figure out new ways we can create these sub protocols on top of descriptions to make this and that and do this and that. Let's just use Facet. It really is, Tom and I think a great single solution for all the computation that you're used to on Ethereum with smart contracts, except you're not using smart contracts.
No, I can say from my experience with Ethscriptions, and that's what you're saying. It's like all credit where credit is due to the builders on Ethscriptions. They've managed to make something kind of remarkably usable for, it sounds like, for what it is, right? Like you said, on the back end, there's like these bots inscribing, and I think from my kind of user experience, I've seen some of the cracks, like the chinks in the chain kind of emerge. Like I think it was a mint, like on the Darwin's mint, they're like, oh, we're a little bit behind, so everyone like be patient. Even with the Ittybits mint, which was phenomenal for everything it was, a lot of people were confused. They were like, okay, we just paid, but I'm getting my Ittybit in a couple hours. Like, they weren't really understanding how this works, why it had to be this way. And so I hear, y'all make the case for Facet in this way. So what are you guys thinking in pie in the sky? If everything goes right, how would you like
your moonshot goal?
How would you like to see Facet as a part of the broader Web3 crypto ecosystem? How would you like to see it being used? Pie in the sky. What is your vision?
Oh, well, I'm glad you. So I actually, I tweeted this on January 1st to really, and I think about it often actually, because like, I don't want to get myself into trouble with it, but I was like, okay, I'm going to tweet. So I tweeted, I was basically like, I think Facet should be the dominant way to scale Ethereum, and actually the dominant way to think about how blockchain should work. And I don't mean that like, we should be putting the whole world in the Ethereum mold and using Facet, whatever. Like, Solana shares various features with Facet or whatever, but just like, if you are looking at the Ethereum blockchain or any blockchain that has the EVM, I think the pie in the sky thing would be for people to understand that the EVM and smart contracts are not the right way to set up a blockchain and to try to do something different. There is, there's just no reason it should have been set up this way. And that is a kind of crazy thing to say, because yes, that means Vitalik, who's smarter than I am, right? He knows about $0 proofs and everything. That means he was wrong. All of these people were not, and who could have known? Like, back then gas was so cheap. Like, why would they even have cared about any of this stuff? But the big picture idea here is to get away from the EVM as a concept and to try to think, how can we set up a blockchain that is not going to be stuck in this sort of rut of this past way of thinking, because the EVM itself, does not have a great history, right? Like, it got us here, and we have not really seen a secure implementation of it, given the constraints that I said about the L2 thing. So I don't want to throw shade either, because I think L2s are cool and I like using them. But when you look at the blockchain, what do you see? And right now, the dominant view is you see the L2 centric roll up of Ethereum. That's the dominant view. And I think that's a mistaken view. And I think people should look at the blockchain a different way and be, not so quick to think of the EVM and smart contract paradigm as like the way, because it's not the way. And in fact, it's not even like a good way. So the pie in the sky thing would be for Facet, or, another thing that uses the Facet approach, whatever, but hopefully Facet to be the dominant scaling approach for EVM blockchains.
So, because I might have the number wrong, but what is it, like EIP 4844, the proto dank sharding? Like you said, it's something that they're trying to do to even like lower the cost on L2s by a massive amount. I think people think that it's supposed to be on the L1, but like you said, it's kind of like an L2 centric Ethereum improvement proposal. Would I be correct in that description?
Yeah, that's definitely an L2 centric proposal for sure.
Yeah, because I know like that and like blob space, like that's something that they're trying to, focus on. So you're saying like you guys want the Ethereum Foundation to be like, all right, we were wrong. You guys are right. We're gonna focus on what you guys are doing now.
Well, they don't have to necessarily, but yes. No, I think.
No, I'm just saying, like, yeah, like give me your genie.
Yeah,
I'm your genie.
I would say that yes. I think L2s, still have an important place. Like, for example, if you're doing payments, if you're not using smart contracts on the L2, if you're doing payments, like an L2 is great. So, that'd be one example. And there are other more limited examples that are not general purpose. Like, for example, if you wanted to, if some game wanted to create a L2 and you want to use that game's L2, like that's cool too. Like, there are L2 use cases, but for the big picture of scaling the thing, you got to give up the EVM, I think. Yes. And so we'd want that. And the blobs thing, I don't think of as being, it is for L2s, but it is, the funny thing is, like, no one actually believes that the EVM works on Ethereum, right? This is just this is an anti-EVM thing. It's like, hey, Ethereum, instead of doing all this smart contract stuff, you should just be holding blobs. Like, they really gave it the name blobs. Doesn't sound so, appealing or whatever. But that's something that works for Facet too. Like, we share that opinion that L2s and Facet share the opinion that the L1 should not be executing smart contracts, but we differ in how we might, kind of take that through and solve the problem. But we like blobs. I think blobs are cool. We're gonna figure out some interesting things to do with blobs.
Yeah. So then, just to speak to that, like, I don't know what you guys were doing before you guys were architecting this, or like, what was your eureka moment when you were like, oh my gosh, this is the consensus layer is what we should be focusing on this whole time. Right. But like, where are you guys like in the Ethereum like the developer community? Like, where are you guys like with that? And are you guys going to these conferences, and like, have you guys been getting traction with the core developers and builders? Or like, are you guys like, they're like, oh, those fringe crazy people that are actually getting traction, like
we're definitely the rebels, that's for sure.
But we will be at ETH Denver. Okay?
We will be at ETH Denver.
This is my first ever Ethereum conference that doesn't rhyme with NFT NYC. It's really, an NFT NYC sucks. So sorry, the last one was terrible. So
yeah, I know.
I'm going to be there. But yeah, we're the outcast. It is not. If we are right, do you know how many blog posts Vitalik will have to update? Like hundreds of blog posts. You know how much that would hurt his wrist? So like, there's no chance. It's crazy. It sucks. Because we're not like, we're pretty. We're nerds or whatever. But yeah, no, it's a very tough. It's really like, it's a clash of worldviews. It's religions. Like, I've stopped posting on Twitter, or at least I've tried to. I will always go on a dope space like this, and shout out Tom, who's out there, who also encouraged us to do the space, respect Tom a ton. Everyone should follow Tom and, show him love. But like overall on Twitter, it's like, what's the point? You can't convince anyone of any of this kind of stuff. It's crazy. So you just got to build, basically. You can't go around there trying to like start stuff. And then sometimes I did it. I quote tweeted Vitalik recently, and that's what made me extremely depressed and maybe never want to do that again, because I was just like, what's the point of this? So if anyone wants to go and see that tweet, that's kind of like my former self. But yeah, it's tough. I would love to be part of the a cool kids thing or whatever. So open to invitations to the lunch table.
Well, hopefully I'll see you at ETH Denver then. But so just to kind of simplify this and maybe to put it in a box, wrap my head around it. However, so like L2s are essentially saying that we want to do more than L1 Ethereum, right? And maybe what you're saying is that we actually need to do less with our protocol. Is that maybe?
I think what L2s are saying is that if we can communicate effectively our state to Ethereum, we are invincible. If we can do that, we are invincible, and we are golden blockchain, free money blockchain, because we have super cheap everything, and we also have complete security. So this is the L2 position as I see it, which is why I don't understand it. It's basically saying if you can communicate your current state to the L1, then you're safe. And so, to me, that does not make sense. So I don't know how you can build something around that and what the premise would be where you'd say, it's like once you get into that mindset. But yes, I think the idea is, now, how does this happen? Well, let's think about this. Well, if it's a separate blockchain, someone's making money from that, right? Not the Ethereum validators, Coinbase or whoever. And so they want people to use that. And, someone's making decisions at the Ethereum Foundation with some, who knows what the economic incentives are in this whole thing, and fill the block space on L1. And as long as some L2 is filling that block space, it doesn't matter how secure it is. It's like, I don't know what is going on that makes people so excited about this thing. But I do have a hard time articulating the thesis, because to me, it comes down to a very implausible, thing to say, which is if we can figure out how to get the L1 to know the L2 state, the L2 is safe. And that, I don't know. Maybe that's not a great answer, but yeah, I don't know how I would characterize it exactly.
No, and that's fine. The other thing that I was kind of curious about was this whole, like, Vitalik is wrong, right? But maybe I'm trying to create an analogy in my head. Maybe that's how I understand things a little better. I think about like the founding of the United States. People have looked at our Bill of Rights, everything like that, and you'll hear this thing like, oh, the founding fathers, they could have never foreseen where we are now. Like, is that kind of how you see maybe the beginning of Ethereum? You said like gas was cheap and life was good, like, and now just things have changed and escalated to a level that maybe we couldn't have foreseen. Is that kind of how we ended up here, or how do you think about how we ended up here, or why we maybe got it wrong to begin with?
Yeah, I mean, Ethereum is completely unbelievable that it works at all. Like, let's be honest, like everyone can remember, I think, when they first came to understand what it actually was, that it wasn't just like, Bitcoin, although not Bitcoin's cool because of the ordinal thing, but it wasn't just like a basic, speculation on one asset thing. You could build, it's amazing that it works at all. So yeah, I think part of it is, let's design a system that makes the most sense from the outside. And oh my God, it actually works. And people are putting real money on this. And, and this is amazing. So yeah, I don't think there's any way someone could have foreseen that it would work. At least if you're me, I couldn't have. So, how could you have seen this for a problem? So I definitely agree with that. I don't see, though, I don't understand how the L2 thing, I would love to have some history of that or something. I do not understand how that became what it is today, which is not to say, oh, interesting tech thing, as I've said. It's not like, oh, like, of course, L2 is an interesting tech thing, but how it became, the answer, when it just, it's just the emperor has no clothes. It's like, I don't want to be combative, and like alienate people, because, a lot of people have bet their entire career on this L2 thing. And far be it for me to like, be annoying about it, but it does not make sense. And it doesn't make sense. And it's obvious it doesn't make sense is the other thing that I don't understand, where it's like, the problems the L2 people are trying to solve are way harder than the problem of understanding why their entire project makes no sense. right? That is the bizarre situation we're in. So I don't have a great, sense for it. I think, if you were a cynical person, I'm sure you could figure out some way to, put together all the incentives and whatever. I mean, Vitalik is an enormous holder of Ether. So, is that a conflict of interest or not? I don't know. Are the interests of Ether holders perfectly aligned with, the interests of everyone else? I don't know. I don't know, all that stuff. I don't pretend to know people's incentives or whatever, but I will say it is a great puzzle to me that Vitalik tweets the way he tweets about this stuff and okayed this roadmap. And there are so many smart people working on this, and no one is speaking about the completely obvious issues. So, I don't know. I think it's a fascinating thing, and I'm not tweeting about it.
Hey, if the emperor has no clothes, who is the tailor, that's come to town and told the emperor that he's going to make quite the robe? No, I laughed you said that because I told that story literally yesterday. I was like, oh, the emperor has no clothes. My wife was like, what does that mean? And I was like, oh, let me tell you. But I will say that I think your message, it resonates. I know, for myself, it always just felt, this is just intuitively, and I'm not some blockchain historian or smart contract developer or anything like that, but just as a person in Web3, for every new L2 that came out, I was always kind of like, do we
need another one?
Yeah, it was just kind of always like, do we need another one? What's this one doing? It just kind of gets more and more confusing. It always felt like, the message that was being sent was like, oh yeah, these L2s are what's going to enable mass adoption. And it always felt intuitively that it's creating a more confusing ecosystem, which to me would be antithetical to mass adoption. So I was always kind of a little bit confused by that.
Yeah, I think, I think confusion is antithetical to mass adoption. I agree. I am more concerned, though, about people losing billions of dollars, though. In other words, we are in the fun and games period now where people are no L2 has ever failed, right? No big one has ever actually failed. So no one actually cares about anything, right? It's just hey, okay, we're, talking about the theories and it's annoying and L2s are good or they're bad. But if an L2 failed, people would lose billions of dollars. It's FTX, basically, is kind of what I'm saying here. And 6 months before FTX failed, it would have been ridiculous to talk. I mean, I wasn't really even around for the FTX thing, really. So, I don't feel comfortable. I'm not really the person to talk about that. But, as just an example, these L2s, if you look at Arbitrum right now, if Arbitrum failed today, it has what, $10 billion locked, $6 billion in liquid ETH bridged. Where does that money go? Go to the bridge, go to the Ether bridge for Arbitrum and ask yourself, who gets that money if Arbitrum down tomorrow? And the answer is no one knows. And people will lose billions. And so, yeah, people are going to be longing for the days when L2s were merely confusing, because they're going to think, wow, I signed up for Vitalik's thing. I gave all of my money to some random guy or girl, whoever's running the thing. And then the L2 shuts down and where's all my money? So it's I think there's a really big, big, big problem there. And I think it only takes one. And then, I don't want it to happen. I don't think that's good for Facet. It's not going to be good for anyone if an L2 goes down and people lose billions. So that's my, thing basically is it's not if, it's when. And I feel bad for everyone involved in that, especially the people who are going to be trying really hard to prevent it from happening. And it's going to happen anyway, because these are computer systems run by people, so I don't know. That's my concern.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's essentially if you water down what is up with L2s, it's like a space race to scaling Ethereum, because the way that it works right now, it's expensive if you have more people use it. And everybody's climbing up this giant hill, and you guys are riding down a sled from the top of the hill down. And everyone's oh, just trying to do their thing. And you guys are all right, let's work smarter, not harder. And you're saying, I mean, it's kind of weird. It is unfortunate, right? A massive event normally is what galvanizes people to be oh, let's reevaluate what we're doing. It is unfortunate. I mean, but granted, I mean, I'm sure you have enough recorded blog posts and times when you're I told you so. I told you so. I'm telling you. It's eventually, I think it's just really cool and innovative, how just creative this idea is to figure out how to make it easy, even like you're saying, even for as primitive as Escriptions is and with its limitations. I'm still just really impressed by it, because people right now are going to some other chains. They are bridging their Ethereum to other L2s, which shows like there's people are okay with change, right? That's like a tough one because generally people in history hate change. But that does make me more excited for just, like different teams coming and building on what you guys have, and just bringing more attention to it. I think that, like you saw with 80 Bits and Nakamingos, and you have all these other collections coming. And I think you guys are also just building culture around this idea, which is really, I think that's what drives it, right? Media, attention, hype, volume. There's all these different things that bring people around. And I just like me now, like my brain is just firing. I'm like, oh, I just need to like go through a deeper dive and try to think of like how I would explain it really simple if I could to people, to just like be like, hey everybody, this is what's going on. Because like you guys right now are like flying the plane and building it at the same time. And I'm just really pretty fascinated by it.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I appreciate that. That's a good, perspective to keep, because it's just like, yeah, I got to stop talking about the L2 thing, because it's like you walk around and say, oh my God, the emperor has no clothes. It's like, well, the whole point of that story, I think, is that you can't just go and say that because no one pays attention to you anyway. So you got to like make your own clothing store. I don't remember how it ends, but the point being, like, I want to say we're about doing fun, cool stuff, not, the plane's headed towards the mountain on the other thing. And so I would just say, if you want to get involved in Facet or Inscriptions, we're working on better documentation. So that's one thing that's bad now. If you want to help with that, that'd be amazing. But we're going to have a lot better documentation on the new open source indexers, or the VM and the indexer. So you'll be able to build an app on top of this. You can go to discord.gg/inscriptions or discord.gg/facet. There's also a Telegram group that I have for open source. We have for open source called, it's the Telegram short link is Facet open source. I don't know. This is like a melange of things. My point basically is you can DM us. We want to collaborate and do cool and fun things, not just, talk about like, why are things like better than L2s or whatever. So that's the spirit of what we're trying to do. We got a lot of interesting things in the pipeline. And, I think it's also, we also want to just make it clear to understand what's going on. Like, I think the NFT example is where we came from. It's the easiest example, but the biggest stuff on Facet right now is the DEX. And I would love to find some format or some way to, if you really want to understand what we're talking about, that's the best way to do it, because the DEX, you can really see like, that's something that's really hard to do without smart contracts. And so you could check that out on Facet Swap, and Facet Scan is the block explorer. So anyway, the point is, we want to party, we want to do cool stuff, and it's been great to just be able to talk to everyone here, and thanks for having us.
Dude, absolutely. I just want to go ahead and extend it to, if anybody in the crowd wants to come up, it's a community-led Twitter space, so you're more than welcome to join the conversation. I'm really glad that we've kind of opened up this can of worms and connected. I just reached out to Tom the other day and I was like, Tom, he's always like, been doing like the innovative shit way before everybody else. He's always like, hey guys, here's some crazy thing I'm doing. And we're all like, okay, Tom. And then we're like, oh, hey guys, here's 5 more things of crazy things I'm doing. We're like, okay, Tom. And then all of a sudden it's just like, everybody knows what's going on. And he's like, I've been telling you guys for like a year. And, I just like, to me now it's like, all right, I think it's so cool to see people on the bleeding edge of these things and try to see how we can add value to that. Like, I'm not a developer. I wish I understood how to do it. I just like to do spaces and talk to people. But if that's a way that we can work together and, like try to bring awareness and educate people, that's a net positive for this space. You know what I mean? I'm not in that foo-foo comment back tribalism thing. I think there's going to be a lot of really cool winners here. And you guys, dude, your passion is unmatched. I love it. I love the fire, and I just know like there's so much stuff cooking. And you know, I'm a bit of a foodie.
Hell yeah.
That joke almost
I love
flew.
it. Yeah.
That joke almost flew over my head. I was like, cook, foodie. Oh, God. And Tom, to be fair, I forgot the punchline of the Emperor has no clothes too. I got to the end of it and I was like, yeah, and then he has no clothes. And that's, so you're not alone in that. I'm curious too, and not that we need to dive into it. I think, we're a little bit over our hour, so we can start to wind things down. But, you mentioned the risk, from L2s, and I know we said we're not going to go down the L2 thing again, but, I think about like the Bitcoin ETF that just happened. TradFi is looking at this, they're playing with some extra zeros than we're used to seeing. It's a little more simple. I'm wondering, I'm curious what the TradFi people look at Ethereum and what they think. If they see the L2 thing and they see that as a liability, complexity, how they view it from the complete outside. So I'm very interested to see, and hopefully we can get some answers to that soon.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think there is a mid-curve thing. I don't know. There's a meme about this where it's like, I would say that if you're looking at it from the real outside, then you would also be skeptical of the L2, because the outsider, the true outsider perspective says, forget all this mumbo jumbo. You're talking about getting on a blockchain run by Coinbase. Like, I'm going to ETF something that's controlled by, it's like, it doesn't, anyway, whatever. But yes, I am curious actually myself, because it is such a, it's much more complicated to kind of understand for a normal person what's going on, basically. Like, even if you are completely bullish on the existing roadmap of Ethereum, I'll shout out Fubar, who's a nerd like I am, better nerd than I am, who's someone to follow, because it's like that he is like one of the people who's like part of like the cool kids, but who questions Vitalik, who I like. So anyway, you should follow Fubar, but and he's commented on this as well. But like, yeah, it's intense. But yeah, I guess there's an ETF coming soon. So what do I know?
Yo, Pool King, go for it.
Hey, thanks for having me up. Really interesting conversation here. I had a question. So the Facets cards that you were talking about, right? In order to, I guess, mint it, you need to have, and sorry for getting a bit technical, just trying to understand it. You need to have the FETH coin, is that right?
Yes, you need FETH. You need to swap your ETH for FETH, which is the currency of, or not the currency, but the currency that our apps on Facet use, which is like an ETH equivalent, basically. And what it allows you to do is to pay for things without having to use a smart contract that uses ETH. You can pay for things in the Facet ecosystem using this. So you have to get it, and then you can use it to buy the cards, and also to make swaps on Facet Swap, and to do other stuff.
Thanks for that. So basically, to swap it, obviously you need some ETH, right?
Yes.
To be able to do it, because that transaction needs, I guess, to happen on the L1 itself, in a sense. And then what is so if I'm putting in, let's say, $1 or $10, whatever it is, worth of ETH, what's the comparison as far as what do you get in ETH?
It's 1-to-1. And by the way, also just one important thing that you said: any transaction on Facet, the gas is always in ETH. So the gas price you pay is always ETH. So that's like but yes, it's like kind of like wrapping ETH, or it's a asset that is 1-for-1 with ETH, and is just like a way of using Ether that is convenient and that works with the rest of the Facet ecosystem.
Right. And is this, sorry, again, getting into the technicalities, but this is kind of fascinating. I might DM you on the side, but since we're on, so is this like also the token for what you guys use it? Is that like, are you guys looking to, and it was just created, or how does the tokenomics of it work, in a sense? I mean, because I guess, is it on a couple exchanges now, or?
So yeah, the tokenomics of the FETH token is that it's just Ether. So it's like wrapped Ether. It gets minted when ether is deposited and gets burned when ether is removed. So it's not really like a token in that sense. It's just a way of getting ether into the system so that you can use it and buy things with it without using smart contracts, and then you can pull it out. There are other tokens that have either been bridged in or created on Facet, which you can see on Facet Swap, but those tokens aren't affiliated, with us. They're just tokens that people have created and want to trade. We did create the Facet token, but the Facet token is not really a real thing. It's just like it's just one for one with the ether people use to deposit to get it.
Gotcha. Okay. Thanks for that. Made some things that I had kind of cleared
Sure.
out. So appreciate it. Thanks.
Hey, Diesel, did you have anything that you wanted to say?
Oh yeah, I just was curious. Well, actually, with the last thing you guys were just talking about now with the Facet. So when you're wrapping the ether into Facet, where's that ether going?
So the ether goes into a smart contract.
Okay, I was just curious because you said no smart contract, so I figured there had to be at least one for that, right?
Yes. So the you need a smart contract if you want to get stuff from quote unquote normal Ethereum, although this is all just Ethereum, right? But it's like to get stuff, if you want to get value from normal Ethereum into Facet, there needs to be an interface with the smart contract. If there's, in the future, maybe people will be going directly from, Kraken or Coinbase into Facet, and then you won't need a smart contract for that. But yes, if you are doing that, you need a smart contract. And so the idea, though, is that you should only have to use it when you are getting value into Facet, whereas the problem we were solving on Escriptions is you have to use it to transact, whenever you want to buy or sell something on Escriptions, you have to use a smart contract. But here, you just get it in there, and then everything else you do is without a smart contract. So there is that action of getting it over, though, does require a smart contract.
But you're still having to use ETH as gas, you said. So essentially, it's just recognizing it almost kind of like a different transaction when you're using it.
Right. So you will use ETH as gas. You'll use MetaMask as or whatever you want, as your wallet. But the transaction that you do will not be something that is, and you'll be able to see it in Etherscan, just like any other normal thing, but it won't be recognized in Etherscan as what it is accomplishing in Facet. You will have to use a Facet block explorer like Facet Scan to see it, because it's a non-standard, though equally valid way of using Ethereum. The tools for doing that interpretation on mainstream sites like Etherscan aren't there, but the transactions themselves will show up there, and everything will work normally when it comes to like paying for the gas and executing them.
The reason for that is Facet, though, on Ethereum, like, so every transaction on Facet is an Ethereum transaction, but contracts on Facet cannot move ETH like your Ether, right? So you need a Facet like you need an asset that Facet is aware of. It's a whole different paradigm. Though 100% on Ethereum, like, every time you're interacting with it, it's you're interacting with an Ethereum node, but the interpretation of what you're doing is completely different, and it can't move Ether for you. It can do it can interact with other contracts on Facet, right? But Facet can't move your Ether. And so but the neat thing is that Ether can get wrapped as Facet completely trustlessly, because smart contracts can create Escriptions, and Escriptions can be commands to Facet. And so the smart contract, when it knows it got ETH, it will tell the contract on Facet, and it's the only one that can tell it, right? It's the only address that can mint is the smart contract on Ethereum, and so when it creates that Escription telling the contract on Facet to get you your ETH on Facet, it's all like really cool and seamless. So
is there do you have things like where you have approvals on, like how you have on Ethereum for
Yep. You have to. Yeah. So you'll notice like initially it might not be like you'll have to get like if you're doing like swaps on Facet Swap, for example, or whenever we release the marketplace for Facet cards tomorrow, like anytime you're like wanting something like another contract on Facet to like do something for you, you're gonna have to give it approval to like transfer your fee because like unlike on Ethereum where you don't need like to give a contract permission to transfer your ETH for, you know what I mean, like you can just like send it with your transaction and then that like can, you know, do its thing or whatever. Like when on Facet it's like you're using WETH, you know, for everything instead of ETH. And so it's like you're always just using WETH. Like FETH, even though like we created it and we like created like, you know, the contract to like wrap it and get it in and everything, is not the currency, quote unquote, of Facet. Facet is a people's protocol. It's not a Michael and Tom's protocol. And so we even though we have this, like someone 100 years from now could have a completely different token that they have on Facet that everyone is trading with primarily 100 years from now or something. Like, you know what I mean? So it's just what we use to get ETH into the system, value into the system, and you know eventually we'll have like ways to get in like maybe USDC or something. But yeah, maybe that. Matt, does that make sense?
Well,
Yeah, absolutely.
I think there's something worth saying in there. Like you said, there's no number go up on FETH. You know, Michael and Tom aren't the world's biggest FETH holders. Is that kind of what I'm hearing?
Yeah, definitely not. We're probably far from actually the world's largest FETH.
Yeah, how do we make money from all this? Like, if it were an L2, right, we would make money on every transaction.
Right.
And yet, I mean, the answer is we take a fee on Facet Swap or whatever. But like, we're trying to build apps. It's a people's chain, or it's not even a blockchain. It's a people's way of using Ethereum.
It's a people's protocol. Come on,
people's protocol. Yeah, it's liberation. That's good.
Yeah, we make money. Tom and I make money when we create applications that run on top of Facet that anyone else can create. And so it's like, you know, it's a competitive thing in a way or whatever, but we are encouraging and welcoming developers into the space. Please come in and compete with us. You know, I'm kind of kidding, but like, you know, we're doing like one thing to make money. We're not going to be trying to like do literally all the things. So please come and start creating other things, because I need to sleep. Tom and I cannot be creating the OpenSea on Facet and the like, you know, whatever else on Facet. We need devs creating these things too. But it is important to know, like Tom said, we don't make money off these transactions. It is not ours. Like, it is not controlled by us, gate kept by us. We don't sequence your transactions like L2s do. Ethereum validators are the ones creating your transactions for you and getting them added to the Ethereum blockchain. And so that's
I don't think I said it because I'm obsessed with the L2 thing, which I don't want to talk about anymore, shutting down. But like what Michael's saying is that's the whole reason, the whole point of this whole thing is we can't be shut down, right? This is the exact thing, because we are not making any money off of the, because we are not the only people who can sequence it, because we don't own it. There's no way we could even shut it down if we wanted to, because if you have the open source software, so by the way, we could delete it off GitHub, so you should go clone that. But like, I'm assuming there are other people cloning that. You can get the software, that your way are protected. But even if we delete it off of GitHub, we shut down everything, you could just run the software and keep it going. So if you have a token or an NFT or whatever you want, Facet card on Facet, no one can do anything about that. In the same way
that deleted the code for the VM. The code that creates all the contracts for the contracts that are on Facet are stored on Ethereum. So you could rewrite the VM to run the code to obey the rules of Facet, even if, and that would be like, whew, a lot of work. Trust me, we've done it.
Yeah, let's keep the. Can you do a quick backup of the code, by the way, when we're done with this call?
Yeah, let's not let's not lose the code, but I don't want people leaving this space thinking, oh my God, if the code is deleted, we're all fucked. Like, it's not the case, though it'd be highly inconvenient, and it would probably take some time to replicate what the current code base is doing. It is not impossible. And so, I just wanted to say that, like, every time you deploy a contract, that code for that contract is on Ethereum. And so it's not like hidden.
No, I love that. I love that. Maybe you gotta, put the code on chain or something like that. You describe it somewhere,
Yeah, maybe IPFS.
AWS. Yeah, why not?
Yeah.
I do gotta say, so I just want to say I got a boogie because I got some life commitments, but I do want to thank Tony's gonna keep it running, but I do want to thank Tom and Michael for coming to join us tonight. I've been a fan and follower of Eastscriptions and Facet, so it's wonderful to kind of share the stage with you and hear your thoughts, your opinions, your all the above. So it's been super fun. So I can run, but I just want to say thank you to both of you guys.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
And I do see 2 of the 3 new Doodles Community Council members, but Doobie, you've been throwing so much love. You get the final question.